what is a woman, has become a question of intense political discussion in the UK and America of late. I'm not a biologist, said US Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson when asked. In the UK, politicians of all stripes fall over themselves on a daily basis attempting to answer this question, with some enthusiastically proclaiming the answer is an adult human female, whilst others, such as Mayor of London Sadiq Khan, accusing those who ask the question of being, quote, in danger of inciting hatred against people. For many ordinary people, the idea that this has become such a heated topic of discussion is baffling, to say the least. But with gender ideology seeking to replace sex difference with the psychological sense of gender identity in law, policy and social relations, the answer to the question, what is a woman, has far-reaching consequences. Well, joining me to discuss this is Colin Wright, evolutionary biologist and contributing editor of Quillette magazine. Thank you for joining me, Colin. In your understanding, what is a woman, first of all?
So it's pretty simply straightforward. A woman is an adult human female. And as a biologist, I can break each of those down very quickly. So an adult is any member of a species that reached their average age of reproduction for members of their species. A human is a member of the species Homo sapiens. You know, we used to have other species like Neanderthals who may have been able to reproduce with humans, and they would have been considered Homo sapiens as well, but they no longer exist. So humans are pretty self-contained and a single species. And then a female is someone whose reproductive anatomy is organized around, through development, the production of small gametes or eggs, as we tend to know them. We're living through a sort of a weird time because scientists and people generally used to be known for being very careful to not pretend to know things they didn't know. But out of political correctness, we're in a space now where scientists are seeming to pretend to not know things that they absolutely do know now. So it's been an interesting inversion.
I said on Twitter a couple hours ago that I'm not fully convinced about the very clear distinction between sex and gender, as often trans rights activists and gender critical feminists put that biology, sex is biology, and gender is, you know, social roles and is a social construct. I mean, do you agree with me, or do you agree with other people that these distinctions aren't often as simple as we would lay them out to be, and perhaps that's caused some of the confusion, or maybe they're the same thing?
So it really depends on how people define gender. So as a biologist, I tend to let people define gender how they want to, and they can just tell me what their definition is. But when we're talking about biological sex, you know, as a biologist, that's my realm. And when we're talking about whether someone's male or female, it has to do with their primary reproductive organs and whether or not they're organized around the production of small or large gametes. Now, gender, some people hold this to be just a pure identity. Sometimes it's identifying with the stereotypes of masculinity or femininity. Some people talk about gender as just being evolved differences in behavior. There's all kinds of ways, or a social construct based on people's perceived sex. So there's all kinds of definitions for gender out there. Some just equate it with sex as well. So really just, you have to ask people what they mean by gender. But for sex, that is a very specific defined term within science. And so that's what I just try to maintain as being, make sure we are all understanding what that is, and then we can talk about what things that it isn't.
And radical feminists increasingly in the UK are now seeing this issue as a defining issue for them politically. Like I've seen increasingly feminists that I know that say that they will not vote for a particular political party or individual if they cannot answer that question clearly. I mean, do you think that the inability to answer that question on the part of some individuals, cultural and political figures, actually shows a sign of their cowardice, or you know, it makes you question them politically if they're not able to answer what for most people are quite simple questions?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, women's rights has been a huge issue for decades, if not centuries. And, you know, when people in the US and other places, when women weren't allowed to vote, no one questioned what a woman was. Everyone knew that a woman was based on the reproductive biology and not their identity. You couldn't just identify as gender fluid, walk up to a voting booth and claim that you identified as a man that day to vote. When a sexist is going to be sexist towards a woman, they don't ask what their pronouns are before they treat them differently in society. So we know what a woman is. And this seeming pretending to not know what that is out of this sense of political correctness, or that it's politically damaging, well, to me, that should just be a major red flag, that this is a candidate that's not going to uphold any sort of civil rights that I think women definitely deserve and have fought really hard for in the past.
Well, thank you so much, Colin Wright, evolutionary biologist and contributing editor of Quillette magazine. Thank you for joining me this afternoon. Before we get into the next discussion about Mary Whitehouse, I just want to get your reaction, Emma, to the debate that we just had with Colin about this whole discussion about what is a woman. It seems like every single day now politicians are asked by various broadcasters and journalists what the definition is, and it is fascinating to see their reaction every time that's asked.
It's become the go-to gotcha question, and I think one of the reasons why, other than the obvious reason that it's of importance to the public debate, I think one of the other reasons why that question keeps getting asked is because of the way the politicians respond. They react as if they are frightened and want to jump behind the couch and hide from the question because it is the most frightening thing that they could possibly have been asked. And I think it is because, you know, it's a thorny and complicated issue when you bore really deep down into it. And for most people, it's a very straightforward, simple thing that a woman is an adult human female, and whether you're a male or a female is an issue to do with sex. But because of all of the sort of definitional complexities around gender for the gender activists, that whole way of thinking is almost a worldview unto itself, and it's almost like a religion with a doctrine and all of the complexities that go along with that. And I think that can be a very daunting thing for a politician that knows that they need to kowtow to something that they feel that they need to kowtow to something that they don't really fully understand. And for them, ultimately, it's going to be a lose-lose situation, because on the one hand, they'll be hounded by activists, a very small number of activists who hold a very radical view of gender ideology, versus the majority of the population who hold views that we've held for millennia and that are very, very straightforward. And so what you end up with is these politicians equivocating radically, and that makes them appear to be untrustworthy because they are equivocating on a question that they should really be able to straightforwardly answer.